Hello, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. Hope you've all had a fantastic weekend. And yeah, especially those of you who had a long weekend spending with your family and friends. That's always amazing. So, and again, thank you for those of you who joined us with Kerri and Caleb on our gathering on Saturday night, early Sunday morning for you, Kerri. And Saturday morning for Caleb. So yeah, it's quite incredible when we have this time space thing happening, because I think you're about 8 hours ahead of me, aren't you? Caleb's, I
Yes.
think, 9 hours behind me. So there's quite a way that we connect on these meetings. So it was really cool to have everyone there, and I want to just say thank you again. Kerri, I think before we start with you, you might want to just say something about the emails, right? I think you mentioned
Oh,
that as
okay.
well.
I just want to say hello to everybody. And I sometimes get emails from people, and I got an email from somebody called Jess. Don't know if it's anybody connected through Aquarius Rising Africa, but they just said, hi, hello, how are you going? That was it. And I don't want to respond to people that don't want to share stuff about themselves. So if people want to contact me, that's fine, and I'm more than happy to respond. But it would be really nice if they just mention a bit about themselves, why they're contacting me, and that they're contacting me through Chantelle's show. So that would be really lovely. If they mention Chantelle, that would be great.
Yeah, or Aquarius Rising Africa. I think
Yeah.
that's because, and at least, and we know
Okay.
there's lots of dodgy things out there right now. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it comes with the territory, right? So we're not
Yeah.
complaining. It's
Yeah.
just got to be
Can
aware.
everybody just excuse me for a minute? I just need to go shut a door. So maybe you could discuss that for a minute. Just give me a sec.
No worries whatsoever. So yeah, are we going to be talking about Kerri's further on with her journey um, of being one of these forced adoptees? And as you can see, the title is From Pain to Purpose. And for me, that's always an amazing thing. Pain is never meant to crush you, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain. It's never meant to crush you. It's there to take you to a deeper level of awareness. And if we can sit with our pain and understand, and through whatever means you want to use, understand what it is the pain is trying to teach you, that's when you're going to transcend it. So it's a powerful message, from pain to purpose, because once we take that pain and we then start turning it into what God's purpose is for us, that's when the healing truly does set in. And that's what I must say. I have so much respect for all the overcomers and the survivors who have done this sort of thing and are busy doing it, because it's not easy. Pain is not an easy thing to deal with or to face. It's excruciating. But when we can get that message, that's when pain purifies, Caleb, you're right. So, awesome. Well, over to you, young lady.
Oh, thank you.
I
Sorry about
see you
that.
both got the memo today. We're all
Oh,
dressed in colors.
yeah, a bit of grey and that. I mentioned it the minute I came on. I nearly wore a scarf, exactly that colour. And
Yeah, so it's grey as well. Different. Yeah,
I,
we'll
sorry, I said straight to Chantelle. I said, how do we colour coordinate today? That's a bit weird. So,
we apparently sent each other a memo in our sleep. So,
so I've got a
we both
trusty.
got the memo.
Yeah. So hope everyone's feeling good. I was telling Chantelle before I came on, because we have a little chat before we come on, I had 14 hours sleep, or nearly 14 hours sleep last night.
Wow.
Because I was, to cover the show with Caleb, I had to be up at 1 o'clock Sunday morning, and I didn't get any sleep before, and I only had 4 hours sleep the night before that. So
Wow.
So basically, I had to have a big catch up. So I haven't slept like that since I can't remember. But I woke up thinking it would be 6:30 because I always wake up like 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30. And I got up, walked out the kitchen and looked at my clock, and it's 10:15. Just about at a bit.
It's amazing, though.
Yeah. I knew I was tired, but I was dead tired. Like, I don't even think my sheets moved or my anything. I just think I lied down. And so I was exhausted. It was like, but it was good. It was great. Lovely to see people in there the other night. I'm going to say the other night, but it was only yesterday morning for me, so it's a little confusing. But
it was nighttime for me, so it was great. It really was a great show, and we won't be posting it. As I said, I wasn't sure whether I'd be posting it or not, but we won't be posting it. Also, just feel like there's people who, obviously, when we share on that level, don't necessarily want the world to know, and I respect that. So, but yeah, we'll let you know. We do it on Patreon for those of you who don't know as well. Not because I want to exclude anyone, but because for that reason we are getting a lot of infiltrators at the moment, and the Patreon kind of prevents that. But I'm happy to chat to anyone if you guys want to join it, even if you aren't part of the Patreon. If you don't have means to join, honestly, I'm not going to exclude you. So all you need to do is send me a mail, and we'll sort that out. Chop chop. Caleb had 1 hour sleep, but yeah, Caleb. We are praying for you that you sleep, that's for sure. I know that you have a battle with sleep, but some days you sleep well, others not. But yeah, so anyway, sleep is just such a wonderful healing medicine.
The body needs it. The body needs it so badly. We don't realize how badly our body needs sleep. I remember when I was going through my worst PTSD, I think I was like 4 or 5 days without sleep, and it can practically send you insane.
That really can, absolutely. That's part of torture, isn't that? And I remember in the prisoners of war or something.
Yes,
they would literally deprive them of sleep, and it's like that can absolutely make you go insane. I mean, I've worked in the past with crystal meth addicts who have not slept. I mean, they just can't sleep when they take this drug.
Yeah.
I mean, the crazy hallucinations. I have to say, I chuckle. I mean, it's not funny, but some of the things that they come. And now you can imagine sleep deprivation along with these crazy ass drugs. I mean, there's some crazy hallucinations that they would go through.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, we wish everyone wonderful sleep. That's for sure. So, right. Madam Kerri, over to you.
I wanted to present some stuff, and I wasn't sure quite how to do it, and I had to really think about it. So let's just hope tonight goes well, in the sense of, because I've got nothing written down on paper, I've got nothing to guide me, I'm just going to wing it like I normally do.
Wing it, babe. Just wing it. That's how we always just do the shows. Yeah, we wing them.
Yeah. So why I picked this was because I wanted to really think about what took me through different stages of my life to where I was. And of course, I want to go back to I was about 13, 14 when I started drinking quite heavily. So mind you, I'd not remembered any of my abuse, but I was living in it and I was blocking things out. And I was dating an older guy, and that older guy became my husband. But I was drinking very heavily, and I was hanging around with people who were drinking very heavily. And so I would, my glass was almost like a vase. So it was my other hand, about big. And I would probably fill it, probably half of Bacardi and the rest Coke. And by the time I was 18, I could just swill the first one down and still be sober. So I did a lot of drinking, and I drank at night time, and I drank during the day. and I drank at night time again. So that was, by the time I was about 19, I had no lining on the inside of my stomach. But by the time I was 19, hang on, I'm skipping a bit. I want to take you through what happened when I left school. So school wasn't good for me. I actually was one of those kids at WAG school, gave teachers a hard time, and got caught. And I remember sitting in front of the principal, and my 2 adopted parents had to show up to the office, and they sat there like butter wouldn't melt in their mouths, and I just had to cop the worst abuse there was, as if I was the most ungrateful person on the universe, because these 2 wonderful people had adopted me, and that basically I was letting them down severely. I wasn't coping with school because of the authority that was there. I didn't think I was very bright. I was very good at English, but pretty much just skimmed my way through most subjects. I was just kind of passing time as best as I could, because I could get out when I was 15, and I thought I'll just go get a job. So I was made to stay till the end of grade 10, and I didn't pass. So my pickings were pretty slim in getting a job. But all I cared about was working with animals. I absolutely adored anything that had fur or feathers. And so I figured that's what I was going to do. You didn't need too many qualifications to do that. So I left school and I worked in a boarding kennel for a very short time. And then I got offered work working in a greyhound farm. And now there was a lot of stuff going around about greyhound farms and greyhound racing that was pretty negative. And my adoptive father tried to get me to work in a factory, and I was absolutely not, for double the money.
What happened to the greyhound factory?
Well, no, he wanted me to work in a factory. I don't know what sort of factory.
Right. Okay, sorry, misunderstood.
There was absolutely no way I wanted to work with animals. And I lived in a really isolated place. Like, there was no transport, there was no traffic lights or anything. It was pretty open sort of area, in the sense of I couldn't catch a bus or anything. And I eventually bought my own car and drove it around without a license. So I could get away with it. But I started working for this couple that owned a greyhound farm, and at first he just had like dogs underneath the house, and he wasn't that big well known, but over the 18 months that I worked for him, he became quite wealthy. He had 70 dogs in what were called spelling runs down at the back of the property. And to this guy's credit, all his dogs were exceptionally cared for. I never saw anything cruel on any level. And if I had, I would have lost it and would never have worked there. He ended up building quite a large facility where he had about 25 professional racing dogs. They were racing all the time. And so when I first started working there, I just do my, 9 to 5 sort of thing, and I travel to and from. But things at home weren't real good for me. So I spoke to his wife, and somehow they offered to let me live there on the premises. And I thought that would be okay, because I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I would do my work, have a rest during the day, and then work at night. But I would also go to the race meets twice a week. Now, this became, what happened here, it became a common theme in my life. And I really believe that it had everything to do with what I was what I went through as a younger child. So within a very short time span, the husband, who was 47 at the time, started making sexual advances towards me. And yeah, he was married to a woman who was much younger than him. She was 27, pretty certain, beautiful lady, gorgeous lady, but she wasn't always around because she owned her own business, but he was home all the time. And of course, I started copying some pretty direct innuendos, and he also tried to make out to his mates that he was actually sleeping with me. And I didn't know how to react to this sort of behavior. And I remember walking into the office one day going, you know, what else is it you want me to do? And he just grabbed me and threw me on his lap and kind of made out to this guy that something was happening between us both. And I didn't know how to react to it at all. And I know what it's like to actually freeze in a situation like that. I think I would have been, because I left when I was about 17. So I would have been about 16 and a half when this happened, because I didn't have my license yet. So he ended up, I kept knocking him back. I kept saying no, absolutely not, you know, like with what he was doing. And eventually he kind of started making things a bit hard for me. And then one day his wife wasn't home and he insisted that I help around the house. And I was prepared to vacuum every room in the house and clean every room in the house except their bedroom. That was a no-go zone for me to walk into. I'd finished vacuuming and he calls me back and he demands that I go into the bedroom and vacuum the bedroom. And I was like, oh, I didn't want to do it, but he was really forceful and he broke me down. I ended up going, you know, I had a bad feeling about it the whole time. And whilst I was in there, sure enough, he comes in and he basically picks me up in a bear hug and goes to throw me down on the bed and tells me straight that he wants to have an affair with me. Like, I'm not even 17. And I remember just hitting him back and just go, no. And anyway, I was pretty shook up because I thought this is now gone beyond a joke. This has gone beyond him just grabbing my hand. This has gone beyond him just asking me for a kiss. And the point he was asking me also before I could get my wages was I had to give him a kiss. Like, and I just run out the door as quick as I could. So at this stage, I knew that things were not kosher at all, and I had to find a way out, which finding a way out meant that I had to go back home. Things weren't any better at home either. And here's the other scenario is that the guy I married knew that this was occurring and did nothing.
How old was he, your boyfriend at the time?
He was 4 years older than me.
Wow.
So, like I said, there was nobody willing to protect me on any level. And you've got to remember, this is before I started remembering any of what I was experiencing at home. And I was also experiencing some really weird stuff from the adoptive mother on top of. She had rung my boss's wife at one stage because I was just laying on the bed in the middle of the day reading a book, and she comes in all concerned and she's going, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Are you sure?" And I went, "Yeah." And I said, "Why?" She goes, "Well, I've just had a call from your mother. She said you tried to kill yourself over the weekend." And I'm like going, "What?" And I said, "No." I said, "Why would I do that?" So she was trying to sabotage this is what she did. She would sabotage relationships. And at the time, I thought it was the weirdest thing. Why would she do it? But anyway, so nobody's willing to help me. I decided that there was one night that he had to run. It was one of those really, really competitive nights where he took a bunch of dogs to what we call the Gabba. If anybody lives in Queensland, they'll know what the Gabba was. And I would often accompany him and manage the dogs. But I decided the night before to go and stay at a friend's place. And that's where I divulged what was happening. And they did at least support me and go, look, do you want to work there? It's not good. And I said, no. And then I basically rang in the next morning and said I was sick, or got my friend to do it because I wasn't game to bring up and say I was sick, because he would have all this prep work before the Gabba. But I thought this is the only way to maybe shake him up a little bit, that I'm, not going to be there. So the Thursday night I wasn't. And so Thursday off, and I went to work Friday morning, and boy, did I cop it. And I basically didn't have any days off prior to that, nothing. And I actually worked on weekends for him for free because he was building up his business so big, and he was getting so busy and getting so many clients. And I remember the vet, who I became quite good friends with, had whispered to me to stop. He said, don't do it. He's just using you. But I loved dogs. I loved what I did, and I obviously thoroughly more enjoyed it than school. But unfortunately, I have this grown man wanting to do things to me that I just wasn't interested in at all. So in front of his wife in the kennels, he starts attacking me in the sense of how stupid I am. And I just didn't know what to do with him. So that was really the straw that broke the camel's back, was I felt that I can't do this anymore. And I was terrified to tell his wife. Anyway, he left that morning, and I decided I'm going up to pack my bags. And before he left, I said I quit. Right in front of him, I said I quit. I want out. And he just slammed his hand down. He says, I knew you'd do this. Anyway, he ended up taking off. I probably should have given him 2 weeks' notice, but as far as I'm concerned, after what he'd done, there was just absolutely, I couldn't have cared less. So I went up and packed my bags. And as I was packing my bags, the wife brought out this book that I was supposed to have signed at the end of every week with how much I was getting. And they were putting down that I was getting more money than what I actually got. And I could see it, so I had to sign every one of them off. And at that stage, as I signed it, I looked up at his wife, and she was standing at the sink. And I was this close. I was about to tell her, because she was visibly upset that I was leaving, couldn't understand what was happening. And we had become quite good friends. And I thought, I need to tell her. And as I called her name, it was almost like she knew what was coming. I don't know, because she swung around and responded in a way that just threw me backwards. Because all I said was a name. I don't want to say it because I don't want to, whether anybody knows me or makes the connection. And it wasn't like, yes, Kerri, what is it you need to tell me? It was a way of making me deflect back. And I just shut down immediately. And I thought, no, I can't say a word. So I picked up my stuff and I walked out. And the hardest thing about that was that there were 70 plus dogs in this kennel that I all knew by name and their personalities. And I could write a book about the personalities of these dogs and the relationships that I had with them. And one dog in particular, he basically was the offspring of a very similar like Farlat, and he came from what they call the Brett Moss lineage, and was very famous, well-known Australian racing dog. And each year the vet, because he was in the kennels down the back on the property, and the vet kept saying each year that he would die, like summer will kill him or winter will kill him. Finally, they allowed him to come up to the house, and he would sleep on the bed with me. And he was a massive, massive greyhound. And he was very old. Greyhounds don't live for a real long time. And he was a big grey dog, and he had lots of Yeah, dark grey, and he had the soft silvery bits all around him, around the eyes. And he would lie on the bed beside me at night, and I would hear him breathe quite heavily. And he'd hear like this. But every now and then you'd hear, and then I'd lie in there with my back to him, and I'd hear nothing. Like, it's like he stopped breathing. And then I'd just give him a little shove, and you'd hear him go, that's how he'd breathe. But he ended up, he'd been a racing dog all his life, never been a pet. And he was this dog learning how to play Tiggy with me. So he would play hide and seek and Tiggy with me. And they believed that his life was extended because of the relationship that he actually had with me. So basically I left that place very sadly. And I took on in a very short time, working for 3 different businesses at once. And
just
one
want
was
to ask you before you, sorry to
Yep.
interject you. I've just got a question from Caroline Godden. Where in Victoria was this experience? Are you prepared to?
That's okay. That was in Queensland, not Victoria. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So, okay. So, yeah, greyhound racing was really big when I was growing up, and greyhounds are not what everybody think they are, and there is a lot of cruelty in it. But where I was, I never saw any of that. But anyway, so I left there, and I ended up working for 3 different businesses at once. So I ended up back in another greyhound farm. In the morning, I'd get there about 4 or 5 o'clock, work there for a couple of hours. And then I went over to a chicken farm, and I worked there in the chicken farm. And then in the middle of the day, I worked for a guard dog business. And then in the afternoon, I went back to the chicken farm and the greyhound business. So, because there were different jobs I did. I was a pretty busy girl. But unfortunately, now the fellow that owned the chicken farm, he was in a wheelchair, and I would have morning tea. And unfortunately, I'm sitting there having my morning tea, and I was wearing a button-up shirt. And this fella decides that he's going to sexually come on to me, and he's in a wheelchair. And I just thought, this is just crazy nonsense. What is going on? Look, I was no stunner. I can tell you, look, and I covered up as a young person. Like, that's just me in general. But this is where they were. Like, so this is the world that I'm growing up in. Like, so anyway, I ended up leaving the greyhound business altogether, and the chicken farm didn't last long, and I ended up working for this guy that owned a guard dog business. Now, people would say, well, what did I actually do? So the guard dog business, this fellow had about 50 dogs, and he hired guard dogs out to industrial and commercial properties. And my position working for this guy was I was the bait. So I wasn't the one holding the lead. I was actually the bait. And I remember my first day working for him. He brought 8 hounds, 9 dogs out. So I had to have 4 either side and 1 at the back. Each dog was chained to a steel picket, and at the end of the chain was a like a bed spring. It was sort of like this big spring. So when the dog lunged at you, the spring, they weren't choking themselves, and to have a bit of give in it. And I'd never seen anything like it. So we had 4 either side of me, 1 down the middle, and it was my job to run in and around these dogs to get them to try and eat me. And I thought it was the best job anybody could give me. I'm sorry, I might be a bit twisted, but
a bit of an adrenaline junkie there, are you?
it was fun. I didn't look. We had dogs as pets, and I worked in the Greyhound farm for 18 months, so I had a pretty good understanding of dogs. But I learned a lot more working for this fellow. We were never cruel to the dogs, and all I had was a corn sack that I had to twirl around and flick at them. And if they got hold of the corn sack, you know how dogs like to tug and chew, and he'd encourage them and praise them up for killing the corn sack. And these dogs were not trained on command. They were just trained to eat humans in general. And there were a couple of times I lost nearly a foot and a shoe and a hand. So I had to be really, really quick, and I had to know how to read a dog exceptionally well. And I mean exceptionally well. And I needed to know when to take command well, in the essence of knowing when to back off, because if you're trying to get a dog to be aggressive and you don't back off at that pivotal moment that dog believes it has the ability to eat you, and if you don't back off and pretend to be all frightened, you can wreck that dog's confidence. So I needed to know when to back off at the right time.
Right.
I knew when to build it up and when to back off. And I remember within about the first couple of days that I worked there, the gentleman said that he tried to employ men to do the job that he'd given me to do. And he said that he'd never seen anybody get in and do what I could do with these dogs, because I wasn't frightened at all.
Well, Leslie says you're only a snack, Kerri.
No, I wouldn't have got much. I was probably about, let's see, at that age, I reckon I was about 35 kilos, if that. So I would have been.
That's like a child, a little wingly.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, try Chihuahua whispering. Yes, Caleb, I've owned Chihuahuas. Definitely. Yeah. So what happened was this gentleman was going broke, and he had the business up for sale, and I loved the job so much. I decided to see if I could try and buy the business. And in those days, you needed a man to sign for everything, even to buy a car. So I was quite surprised when I shuffled off to the bank and I managed to get a loan to buy this business. And
Wow.
So I ended up with 50 guard dogs. And so I had to...
What type of dogs were they? Like German Shepherds?
They were all sorts. Any dog. So
All
this
right.
was the interesting thing about this fellow. We rescued dogs that were going to be destroyed, and we put them to use in the guard dog business. So any dog that was in the pound for biting somebody, we would take and give a new life to, and industrial and commercial properties. So we had all sorts, mixed breeds. Anything with blue heeler in it was a really good dog. There is a bit of a myth around German Shepherds and Dobermans. Look, you do get really good German Shepherds, or Alsatians if you want to call them, but you go through a lot to get the right ones. And Doberman males were the ditziest dogs going. They take a long time to mature. And it was normally the red female Dobermans that I found that were the most responsive to being protective and aggressive and obedient. But anything with blue heeler and a bit of bull terrier in it was exceptional. Anything with bull terrier in it, like if you had someone that broke in and tried to fight the dog off, a bull terrier just wouldn't back off at all. They just latch on and don't let go. So I ended up with 50 dogs. And so I had gone from only a very short period before I bought it, from the bait to the trainer. And there was a couple of times I nearly got pretty well eaten up because it was a bit of a transition. But there was a particular dog that we got in. It was a German Shepherd that was going to be destroyed. And it just got put in the kennels, and I had to step inside that kennel not knowing what to expect. And as I was hosing the kennel out, each morning, her name was Lisa, each morning I would go in and just hose the kennel out and talk to this dog gently. And then within a few days, it had jumped up and put both paws on my shoulders. And I'm just standing there hosing, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to be mincemeat here. And I just kept gently talking to the dog. And she just leant forward and licked my ear. And that dog turned out to be the most beautiful dog ever, to the point that I retrained her and was able to put her within a family setting. So this was what we did. If there were dogs who weren't naturally aggressive, who had been put in the pound for some, minor reason, we were able to train them, love them, and train them, and send them off to homes where they were wanted and loved. So that was kind of in a job that I learned a lot of patience with. I learned a lot about myself. I learned what I was capable of, where the school system had really failed me. But unfortunately, in this job, I got the same problem. The boss had basically hit me up, no different than the boss before. So this is what really inspired me to buy it. I was sick of working for these men that were constantly trying to have sex with me, and they were all married, and I was so young, and I just thought, this is crazy nonsense. So I ended up, that's what really inspired me to buy the business. So I transformed that. I was 19 years old. I had 50 dogs. I weaned it down, so I figured out how we was losing business, and I began training guard dogs for security guards. And I began training dogs for people in private in their home, and it became quite a successful business. And I eventually sold it, and I moved. Well, this is around the time that I gave birth to my son, who'd had a stroke when I sold it, and life was hard, like in the essence of caring for him, and that was what made me sell it, because he needed a lot of care. When he was about 14 months old, and we'd moved up to the Sunshine Coast, and I lived at Coolum with my husband, and I wasn't working, and I was getting a bit itchy feet about working. And I noticed that there was a lot of media covering about children in the area drinking and using drugs and destroying the local businesses, like just smashing windows, rubbish, vomit, the whole lot. And so I decided to have a talk to my husband and see if there was something I could do. And I wanted to kind of get out of the house a bit. And I thought, well, I'll have a go at this. No training, no nothing. And he was fine with it. He was fine. He said he'd watch our son and support me to do it. I rang around different places to see if I could get some help with it. Nobody wanted to help. I got a lot of don't bother. And the only person I got support from was a fellow from the Drug and Alcohol Counselling Service, where he encouraged me to have a go. So late one Friday night, about 9 o'clock, I took myself down to the beach, where I found at least 30 young people drinking and smoking and whatnot. And I walked in amongst them, introduced my name. They looked down on me, all of them, in the sense of height. It was a mixture of boys and girls. It was mostly young fellas, but there were girls there too. When I introduced myself, they said, "Are you a cop?" And I said, "I'm 4 foot nothing. Do you think they'd have me?" And so they asked me if I was a social worker, and I said no. I says, "I'm just a mum. I live in here, in the little town that we're in." And I said I'd heard about all the problems in the town, and I wanted to know if there was something I could do. Well, they were not really having anything to do with me. They were like really skeptical. They were trying to hide their alcohol and whatever else they had, and they weren't warm at all to me by any means. But within a very short time span, three to four cars come screaming into the parking bay, and a mob of boys jumped out of the car yelling and threatening, and ran towards kids in this group and wanting to start a good old punch-up fight. And true to my little nature, I didn't run away. I actually jumped in the middle of it, stood in front of some huge big guy, put my hand on him and said, "Oi, what do you think you're doing?" So when I think back now, I think, well, I was thrown in front of guard dogs that wanted to eat me. Now I've got this very tall young man wanting to rearrange somebody's face that I met within 2 minutes. And of course, I said I was an adult, that I would contact the police, and I had something to say about it. Well, next minute, the bunch that were in the car took off and drove away. And within that instant, all the kids that hadn't given me a second thought and wanted me to go away wanted to know who I was and thought it was the coolest thing they'd seen in a long time. So,
the dog whisperer.
Oh, now I don't know. Yeah, it's very weird. So, eventually, we ended up. They agreed. They said, "Okay, we'll give you a go." And I said, "Well, what is it that you would like?" And they said, "Well, we had a mate who died in a car accident not so long ago. It was only he died in a motorcycle accident, and we'd like to maybe do something in his honor." And I was like, "Well, fine, okay, let's do it." So we had I managed to get a place where we could have our first meeting, and the kids actually voted in a president, vice president, and a secretary. And I helped them open up their own bank account, and the kids had their own checking account, and the kids raised money for everything they did. And so they had a vote on the first activity to which they wanted to do. And most of these kids surfed, so they said they wanted to do a surfing competition. So within a very short time span, and you got to remember, I had absolutely no training as a youth worker. So here's the very first article.
Oh, wow.
So here I am. Where am I? Over there. Go away. There I am there. So I don't look much bigger than some of these kids. So it says here, when young people on the beach at Coolum first saw Kerri, and I won't give you my last name, that was my married name then, they thought she was the fuzz. Then they went on to believe she was a social worker. Kerri is neither. And I didn't write this article, and they kind of pumped me up more than what I was.
The way they call the cops the fuzz. That's so Australian.
Yeah. So they wrote, she's an ordinary mother of two with an extraordinary desire to do something for the young. Kerri, 24, so I was 24 years old, believes too many negative things have been said about kids today, but the people who are criticising the loudest are the least ones likely to try and do something to help. But Kerri's not the type to ignore the person in need. So I talked about, it was a really lovely article, and that was some of the kids in it. So this thing took off in a way that I never, ever expected. And it wasn't the only thing that we did. So that's the sign. So they ran a surfing competition. It ended up being the biggest surfing competition that the coast had ever seen. And I think we had over 200 entrants, and we had to run it over 2 days. And we had the Christian board riders gave us a surfboard that we raffled off, and it raised money. Everything that the money the kids raised went back into the bank account for the kids to run other programs. So here's me with a bunch of kids. At the front.
That's so awesome.
I know. So it was really cool. So it's just a bunch of kids. So they all had trophies. The kids raised enough money. They were going to have a barbecue at the end of it and charge people for a burger each. But the kid, because it was their group, I allowed them to make the decisions. And they came to me and said, look, since we made so much money, can we give the burgers away for free? And I said, your group, your rules. And so that night they gave away burgers and they still had money in the bank. I had them, we created a magazine, and on the front of the magazine was a number. So this is how I got the community to work together. All right, so the kids lived in an area where there was nothing for them. If you didn't surf, or you didn't go on the surf club, and a lot of these kids were underage, there was nothing there for the kids. So what I was trying to do is get them to say, well, if you want something, you've got to make it happen. And unfortunately, before I came along, they were just drinking and taking their angst out on the local businesses because they blamed the local businesses for nothing being there. I got them to create their own magazine, and it covered the things that they were doing. And I would take some of the kids around with me on a Sunday, and we'd go knocking on people's doors and asking if they would like to buy a magazine. And the magazine had a number, like it was acted as like a raffle ticket. And to the surprise of the young people, as they got talking to each household, they realized the support that they were actually getting from the community. So there was a real joining on, together. They were starting to understand that not everybody was against them at all. And so they then had to go to the businesses, front up, the very businesses they destroyed, present themselves, say, hi, my name is such and such, I'm a part of this group. Would you please donate some items so we could raffle off? And every business we went to gave them something to raffle off. So they stopped destroying the businesses. At the end of it, so we had the magazine, but they also did a fun run. And the surf club, we had to get a special license for the kids to have like a dance night in the surf club, and no alcohol could be sold. So we're able to get a professional band in. No alcohol was sold at all, and it was just a really top night. So the kids stopped bagging the surf club. It was just such a lovely thing for me to be a part of. And yeah, and word was getting around that this was actually happening, that I'd had no training. I flunked school. I'd had no training or expertise in any of it, but just a desire to change something within.
Absolutely. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
What you're able to do. That's incredible, Kerri.
Yeah, thanks.
That's
so
incredible.
Mind you, this was before I started remembering all my abuse, but I don't know, there was an inner core in me somewhere to want to put some good back into my world, like just to contribute in some way that was positive. And I did get such a buzz out of it, that I could actually do that. So, there was some really, really great kids. So eventually we had to move, and I moved to another area. And next thing I saw an advert for a paid youth worker position in another town not far from me. And I contemplated, should I or should I not give this a try? And I decided to give it a go, put a little faith in an employer once again. And anyway, I went for the interview, and they only offered me like one night a week, which wasn't much at all. So this was a 24-hour youth service. So they had workers on 24/7, 7 days a week. And they gave me one night a week. By the time I got kind of babysitters and travel and stuff, I was actually worse off, but that didn't last for long. So I learned a bit on how to, it was a sleepover position. So I'd start at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon and finish 8:30 the next morning. But within the 6 months, I started doing more hours, and my skill level improved immensely. I was very quick to learn, and I had a natural ability to connect with the kids. It was just very natural, and I wasn't sure where it was coming from. So I didn't have any, again, didn't go to uni, didn't have any expertise and this sort of stuff. But basically, within 18 months of working there, I was offered a position called the life skills teacher. And that encompassed running groups and activities for young people to do with anything, any subject you pick it. It could have been just basic budgeting, but it was also on things like rape, sexual assault, conflict resolution, anything that these kids endured. They were things that I had to run programs in. And because this was a very different shelter than what you get. It wasn't a crisis shelter. This was a shelter where kids had to apply to be in, and they had to sign a contract that they were willing to apply certain principles and adhere to the rules within the service. And a part of that was the compulsory life skills program. Now, I'd already seen 18 months of life skills program these kids got, and it was a difficult job. And I was not keen to take it. First of all, I had no, as far as I'm concerned, I had no training in it. And I was like, so I said to my boss, if I'm not good at this, if I don't like it, basically I said, if I suck at it, can I have my old job back? Because, this is a hard job. We probably had a series of workers take on this job, and they all left for reasons. Either they weren't good enough or it just wrecked them. So I was asked to take it on, and I was really skeptical about me actually doing it. But the minute that I did take it on, I had this license to be as creative as possible. And many of these kids, the school system had failed them, like the school system had failed me. And
Wow.
I had been away to a training program, an 8-day training program, as a youth worker. And I figured that I learnt very differently to other people. And in that training program, I was exposed to different learning styles, and I just switched on like a light bulb. And so I was able to take that little bit of information into running this program with these kids. And the very first night that I ran a program, I would have to be there till 11:30. So kids had to sit there for 3 hours. You try working with kids for 3 hours that don't want to be there. So I had to figure out a way how I was going to hold their attention. And I remember, like, the principle was that they had to participate. So my ruling was participation comes in different forms. So though it's compulsory, if you just want to sit there and totally ignore me and us and what's happening, that's fine. But don't interfere in the learning of those within the group. Well, because I was doing some really hands-on stuff and some really fun stuff, within about 10 or 20 minutes, the kids that had made this absolute, I'm not doing anything, were like, can I, or can I have a say, or can I get involved?
Yeah.
And my boss would come in at about 11:30 to change over shift. And normally the kids would be like, yay, good, Kerri can go home, or the life skills worker. I remember when I was there, the kids turned around to my boss and said, oh, no, no. I was really shocked. Like, no, we don't want to finish.
Wow.
My boss was a very seasoned youth worker. He'd worked with a lot of street kids, very volatile kids, and he said that he'd not seen anything like it. So I'd actually held that position for many, many years, and I just loved it. To say that someone loves their job, this was just in another realm for me. And what made this really interesting was that I would get a lot of kids that would come in and go, how would you know what we've experienced, right? Now, it was in the early stages of starting to work in the youth service that I had my first little round of memories. So I can't quite remember, but I know it was really early. It was before I became the life skills worker, and it was while I was doing the night shifts, and I was wanting to learn more about how to help young people who had been through severe trauma. So late one night, there was a show on. We have it like an ABC show, and it was about a woman who had been abused severely by her father, and she was only remembering in her 50s. And I remember watching it, and I remember just feeling really weird watching this. It was like a doco type show, and I just felt completely really strange that in essence I'd not felt before. And anyway, so it was very shortly after. That's when I started to wake up early in the morning, just between that sleep, between asleep and awake. And that was when I started having flashbacks about my adoptive father suffocating me. And I had that for probably for about a 2-week period. At first, I didn't know what was happening because you don't get the full picture of it. You would just sort of, I felt like somebody was sitting on my chest or something was on my face, stopping me from breathing. But each morning as I woke up, it was as if the picture became clearer and clearer to me as to what was happening.
You know what I find in these situations, which also through the years that I've been working with people that have been traumatized, it's like when the mind feels safe.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I'm observing here, just from hearing your story, is that for however many years you had been really doing obviously amazing work with the dogs, with the children, your spirit had started feeling free again, happy, joyful. You felt like you had your sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And then it's amazing, isn't it amazing, when that starts happening, you start feeling safe and you are doing something good, that boom, the mind says, okay, you're strong enough now to start dealing with this.
Yeah.
And that's when you would start getting the memories back.
Yeah.
It's incredible how, you know, I just look at that again. And it's incredible how the mind protects us, because obviously as a child, with so many traumas and things that so many of you overcomers have experienced, you know, and obviously whether they deliberately blocked off your memories or whether your mind was automatically doing that, you know, the mind will block it off until you're in a space to be able to deal with it.
Yes.
And I think that's so incredible.
Yeah. And I don't know who said it. I don't know if Caleb did or someone else, someone you interviewed, but I really believe God allows us to gives it to us in snippets, because if we got it, if I got what I went through in one whole bunch,
no, bite-sized chunks for sure.
Oh my goodness, I would never
it's like,
yeah.
Like my friend Yana always says, I love Yana. She says, you eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
It's like really just taking it one bite at a time, digesting that, and when it's digested, then you can take the next bite again. And it's amazing how your mind knows when to release that information. And is it easy? No. So I don't believe anything like that is ever easy. I can only imagine that it's extremely difficult. But it's amazing. And also, you know, and I think even if you didn't have the support system around you, you know, friends or family or what have you, to be able to help you deal with that, you were ready to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's, again, for me, I just find that incredible. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So that when I had that memory, it wasn't long after that I was visiting, on top of that memory, I was visiting my adoptive parents, and I drove past the property in which my adoptive father had started the charcoal pits with. And as I was driving past, that's when I had a flashback of my friend's father sexually abusing me. And when I first got it, I can't explain how I felt. It's just like, you know, how something enters your brain and you're quickly trying to push it out. And I'm driving at the time.
You can't. Yeah. It's just like,
yeah. So that image became clearer as well. So this was kind of in that time frame, and it really did the whole thing threw me sideways. That was when I took myself off to counselling, and I remember when I first started to say something, that's when I went literally blind. So, and I had no idea. Yeah, I had no idea the enormity of what I had been through. And I remember in one session, we had just been talking, and she was sitting in front of me, and I can't even remember what we were talking about in per se, like the exact thing. It was obviously about the abuse, and I was just starting to talk about the charcoal pits, and then I swear it was like somebody, like a film just came right in front of me, like in between her and I, as if something just, and next minute I'm seeing my adoptive mother saying, if you don't behave yourself, if you're not good, if you're not this, if you're not that, you don't measure up, you weren't wanted as a child, you're going to go where unwanted children go, you're going to be stripped naked, chained to a bed with no mattress, have rats crawl all over you, be fed bread and water, and be locked in this room, and you'll be stripped, beaten and strapped every day. And I just disintegrated in that moment. Like, I could see it was played out in front of me, as if you're sitting in front of me, Chantelle, my adopted mother, just coming at me with this. And I just disintegrated. I couldn't believe, and this poor counsellor is just watching me disintegrate, and she needed to know what the heck I was seeing. And I managed to sort of scramble out the words to tell her, and I just broke down. It's so hard to be in that space when you don't remember any of that happening, and all of a sudden it's in front of you, all of a sudden, and you know it's real because your whole physical reaction to it, it's just, and it was crazy. I had to take some time off work, but I didn't let work know what I was experiencing. I did it. I managed it Kerri's way, and got through it. And I kind of thought that was the end of it. I kind of thought, well, there were significant things I remembered, but it wasn't the end of it. But it was enough. It felt like it was enough that God revealed quite a bit to me, and I was digesting it and working through it whilst I was working as a youth worker and being a mum to two young kids.
I can imagine with that, also, especially getting such a traumatic flashback, that you must have known as well that was just the beginning, right? I mean, if that had come through to you, you would have surely known, or did you? Let me ask you if you did realize that was just the beginning. It was almost like that was the first worm coming out of the woodwork. So did you realize that there would be more coming after that? Like, it's like when you open up a boil and you squeeze that gunk, there's like all this gunk just starts coming. That was like,
I thought that was it. And it wasn't until years later that I found that there was more to come. And things that happened were, even though they might have been the same things, there were greater pictures of things. And so I'd go to work and work with these kids, and I then, as the kids were like, over time, where they'd say, oh, you wouldn't know what it's like to, experience. You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You things like that. And you went to university and knew this and knew that. And when the time was right, with the right kids, I would let them know that I knew exactly what they were experiencing and why.
Right.
And so then it transferred to, and it dawned on them, well, if you can do it, like if you've managed to be here today and be the person you are, right, and you're doing like the type of job you're doing, and you're married with kids, blah, 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 then there's hope for me. And I said, yes, there's hope for you. Like, if I can survive what I've survived and you've got the supports at your age, like, what more can you do? Like, where are you going to go from here? And I would tell them I failed school. I didn't pass school. As a kid, that was the weirdest thing, like, for the kids to be looking at me going, how did you end up with a job like this? and I told them, I said, well, this is what I did. I just took a leap of faith to buy a business. This is what I've learned. Then I took a leap of faith, as you know, to work with the young people. Prior it was all voluntary work, but I got experience there and I learned a lot there. And then I've ended up over here. I took a chance, and one night a week, you know, I absorbed as much information as I could, learned what I could from those more experienced than myself. And I relied on things in myself, in my intuition as well on things, you know, like I could go to my boss without any proof and go, this kid's been sexually abused. My boss would look at me and go, don't be silly, Kerri. How would you know? They didn't tell you, right?
You can see the signs.
I was never wrong. And it was the funniest thing. Before I had my memories, I was going, how do I know this, right? This was a weird bit. I'd be going, how do I know? Like, I would know things about people. You know, I just sense things about kids and situations, and it was a bit freaky for me to actually have that sort of, but I relied on it, and when I relied on it, there were kids' lives saved in that process as well by relying on that. I intervened in attempted suicides, and I intervened just in time. And I saw kids' lives absolutely transformed in front of me in a lot of situations. And there was a young girl who she had been a victim of satanic ritual abuse. And this was the first time I basically was exposed to satanic ritual abuse in the sense of a victim. And there was a whole wall that the kids could do a mural on, and I'd actually helped her. We could work with the kids for 12 months, and then we'd help them move into what we call semi-independent living or independent living. And this girl was 18, and we helped her move into independent living with some supports. My employer allowed me to have continued contact with her and help her get on her feet. And I'd helped her get a job, even though she had a lot of issues with reading and writing, got her into counselling, and she was doing really well, but she wasn't telling me anything, but I was actually saw something in what she'd drawn on the mural we had, and I knew immediately her life was at risk. And I basically had to intervene that night. And within 24 hours or so, she basically left the area in quite a hurry and just disappeared, and I never knew what happened to her. Around 9 years later, 9 years later, I had our service was doing its 10-year sort of program, or like, you know, inviting people to come back and celebrate the time frame in which the service had existed. And she'd seen the advertisement, and she wanted to get in contact with me because she couldn't make the event. Long story short, we met up at somewhere, and here she is with two young girls. She had two children. They were quite young, and I offered to buy them lunch, and I walked away to order it, and I come back, and this girl is laughing, and I'm like, what are you laughing at? She goes, you still have that walk. And I'm like, what walk? She goes, that gentle don't mess with me walk. And I go, do I walk like that? And she's like, oh yes. And it kept us in line, right? So we had a bit of a laugh, and then she got all serious, and her two daughters are sitting there, and I think they're around 6 and 5, something like that. Anyway, she told me she'd gotten married, and these were her daughters, still with her husband. And then she said, she got very, very serious and said, do you remember that night that you saved my life. And I said, well, yes. And I was a bit concerned why you disappeared without coming to me. And she says, I had to get out of the area because it wasn't good. And it was the reason why I nearly ended it. And she thanked me. And then she said, Kerri, that was the first night that I felt I was worth something. That was the first time I ever felt that I had value. And she said, I knew that I had to get out of the area to continue to seek that value. Otherwise, I was going to be destroyed where I was. And she says, I just want to thank you. I tell you what, I just about lost it. And then she said, I'm at TAFE at the moment, and I'm actually studying to be a youth worker. And that just blew me away.
To know that you've influenced someone in that way just through your actions is just really beautiful.
Yeah. It
Wow.
just, and these are the, I was probably a youth worker, if I count the couple of years that I volunteered, about 17 years all up with young people. So when I look back at what I experienced and what I lived through as a child and the experiences that I had to where I ended up and who I ended up working with and what I learned about myself in that process. I felt that those young people also gave me something really special. Every kid, every single young person I worked with was special. And I didn't care if I had them for 10 minutes or that whole year. They were getting 110% from me. That's how I felt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's incredible. I love that because and it's like what Joyful Janine's saying. Happy birthday, Janine. I hope you have a beautiful day and an amazing year ahead. Really, have a fantastic, fantastic day. And Janine is saying, Kerri, I bet that made it all worth it. And I want to say, it really, really is, and this is why I keep saying, when we heal from our experience, those traumatic experiences, we have the ability to pay it forward, pass it on to others who also pay it forward. And I really believe, that's how the world works. It's that domino effect that we all create through our own good actions. And that's amazing, Kerri. Really, that's a beautiful story.
Yeah. So even though I was, as an adult, still experiencing pain from my own childhood, that was the one thing I didn't lose focus on, was giving back, and being there for the kids. Because the more that I remembered, the more pain I endured, the more compassion and the more understanding that I had for the young people.
Absolutely.
So,
that's really how it is, I mean, I think people either, they turn right or left. They either become the perpetrator of violence, or they go in the opposite direction and they really heal from their wounds, and then they have that beautiful place of compassion. They become amazing healers, and the world is so needing true, authentic, real healers. So it's beautiful to hear that you've been through. And I agree, Chantelle van Unen. Don't forget to like people. Kerri is a wonderful and brave and great woman. I agree. So please, guys, like, share, subscribe if you like what we're putting out there. And yeah, I just think it's time more and more people start hearing these stories as well. People are I find as well, people are, especially at this time, people are very wrapped up in pain. And there's a lot of that going on right now. So it's always wonderful to hear, these stories, and that there is always hope. There's one thing that I know for sure. Once somebody realizes that there is little thing called hope. Hope just changes everything. It really just changes everything. And or shall I say, it has the potential to change everything in somebody's life. Somebody knows there's hope. There's someone out there who gives a damn. There's someone out there who believes them. There's someone out there who will listen. You know, these are the things that we need to be passing on to all and sundry. Yeah, it's right. It's true, Caleb. It's painful. It's painful you pick the scabs off. And
Yeah.
it's true, you know. Some of the scabs are healed, others are still infected, and then we need to disinfect more, you know, and that's just the whole healing process. But at the end of the day, it leaves that scar, and the scar will be a reminder of what was and what you healed from. That's
Yeah.
really what scars are. And it's kind of like, you know, I always say when I work with people, that's your badge of honor. Your scars are your badges of honor. You know, they remind you of what you've come through. I remember
Yeah.
we used to have my uncles when we were kids. He had scars on his legs. I don't know. I mean, I can't remember what he did, but he would always tell us a story about how he was fighting the crocodiles. He had this big brave story, and for years we believed him. And every time we saw it, every time we saw, we wanted to hear the story about how he was fighting this crocodile, and he killed the crocodile, you know, and it was like swimming through the swamp. And every time he told the story, it changed somewhat, you know, and eventually that's not a true story, but it was wonderful, you know. So I mean, you know, it really is it's true, you know, the slightest glimmer of a hope there is, and just to know that people are out there. And you know, I want to just say as well, you know, there are so many good people in this world. I'm one of those that have been blessed to know that, you know, there are thousands and thousands of people in this world who cannot imagine hurting a child, who cannot imagine depriving a child of their basic human rights, who cannot imagine ripping animals apart for fun. You know what I'm saying? There are amazing people out there in this world as well. And when we move through our pain, and when we heal from this pain, we get to somehow meet them, you know. It's that law of vibration again, you know, that when you vibrate on that healed level, you meet healed people. And then your relationship with people becomes so different because you're not expecting the worst anymore. You're not expecting to be um, deceived anymore, or betrayed, or stabbed in the back, or whatever, or God in the heart, whatever it might be, right? So you're right, Janine. Then it was 4 crocs. It's exactly what I was there. And then I had about 2 crocs, and one that was waiting was like, hang on, hang on. You know, exactly that. So, you know, and that's what I want to just say. So there's an amazing world out there, and there are amazing human beings. Not everyone is an asshole, even though we all can be an asshole. Doesn't
Yes.
mean we can't be assholes from time to time. But yeah.
I would probably think that when I look at it now, is that being a youth worker probably saved me. And, you know, the memories came at a very pivotal point when I was working with them. And
Yeah.
I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't there, if I was doing something else. Because doing what I did, when you're working with human lives, and you would know this, Chantelle, you know, it's completely different to doing any other job. You know, when you're in you know, not that I saw myself as a healer like yourself back then, but I was definitely helping to heal hearts and helping to restoring kids.
Yeah, of
They're not
course you
all
were. I mean, that's
oh,
what a healing is. That's
oh
what, you know, I mean,
yeah,
you think
not at the
about it.
time. Yeah, yeah,
That's what Jesus did. That's who
yeah,
Jesus was.
yeah,
And you know, we must always remember Jesus did not have a Bible which he was punching
yeah.
Bible bashing verses out there, you know, and
No,
demanding that people listen to them or else they're going straight to hell. Jesus
mm,
never did that. You
no,
know, Jesus absolutely, he was the living word.
mm,
He acted in accordance with God's desire for him to be, that's what he did, and that's who he was. And, and that's why I say, we all need to become more Jesus-like, where no one expects us to be perfect or fault-free or flaw-free or whatever it is. We learn from our mistakes. We put them behind us. We allow them to change us for the better. We are not held back by our past actions, because especially when we're looking at people who've been in SRA and who've had child abuse and stuff like that, they can be extremely, extremely scarred. Anyone on this channel knows that, right? And it's important for us to realize as well, and this is something Kathy O'Brien said the other day when I was interviewing her, is that you are not responsible for what your abusers did to you and what they made you do. Because I think, when working with SRA survivors, there are so many people, or so many of them, that will feel guilty about the things they did or the things they were forced to do in that environment, right?
Yeah.
But what you can do is take responsibility. And that's a beautiful thing, because taking responsibility doesn't mean that you now have to go back and right every wrong you ever did. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you understand you get to change the way things are now, and you get to change your future. You do not have to do that or be held back by that anymore. You now get to change things and live and act in a better way or in a different way. For me, that's so true. So I think, it's a beautiful story to hear these things, Kerri, and it's beautiful to hear that you've made such a difference in the children's lives.
I'll tell you a really funny story as an example to that, Chantelle, and that was so important that I never preached to these kids. The kids knew I was different because they didn't swear and they didn't smoke, and like the other workers did, right? Didn't tell dirty jokes and stuff. And they would often ask me why not. But I'll give you a specific story. I was working for juvenile justice at the time, and I was working with a young lady who had been in and out of juvenile detention. That could be very aggressive. She'd fight guys. She was that bad. And anyway, I had to pick her up and take her to activities, like she was having to do schooling and stuff, and I had to spend the whole day with her. And I had to drive her a lot of times, and she would get in the car. Every second word was F, and then she would stick in the CD, and it was the R-rated or X-rated rap music, right? So it was pretty bad stuff, and I never said a word. But after a few weeks, it was really getting to me, right? And of course, I decided, okay, I'm going to need to pray about this. I need to learn how to cope with this stuff right coming in my ears as I'm trying to drive. Anyway, so I just had prayer about it. She would walk around she would have like a little briefcase thing of all her CDs in it, and she guarded that with her life. She took it everywhere. So anyway, I probably finished work with her on like Thursday or Friday. She had the whole weekend away, had to pick her up Monday morning. She gets into the car and she's cursing. She's like, I can't believe it. I went shopping on Saturday. I had my CDs with me. And she says, I don't know what happened. Some mongrel effing stole them, right? And I'm sitting in the car going, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. That's really bad. And in my head, I'm going, praise Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So she was forced to listen to the radio, which then over time, she stopped swearing. She would get in the car and stop swearing. And then she started asking me questions like, why don't you swear? Like in, what do you believe about death and what this and what that? Because she ended up pregnant. She was having a baby, and over time she just stopped. And I'd get a call from the department, and they'd ring me and they'd go, what have you done to, and they'd say her name. They go, nothing. What do you mean? They go, well, she doesn't ring it up and swear at us anymore and make demands and tell us to F off. And that she actually uses her manners and says, please. And they just go, what have you done? I go, nothing. I've just treated her like I treat everybody else. So
amazing.
I removed myself from the person that goes, Because the kids, the minute you would say to them, don't swear and don't do this, do that, they would arc up, right? And rightfully so. We'd have a right to tell them how to conduct themselves unless they were hurting me physically, right? So that young lady turned her life around, had the most gorgeous child, and I ran into her many years later with her boyfriend, who was the father of the child, and she'd had another child. And I was just so proud of who'd she become, because both of them had been in and out of juvenile detention. And it was just a really great story. And it was a really good lesson. That's the story.
Yeah.
If I was a youth worker, that's what I'd tell them. It's not our place to correct. This is what these kids grew up with. And the greatest sermon you will preach is the one you live, not the one you speak, but the one you actually live.
Actions. It's your actions that actually speak so much louder than words. I fully agree with that. I most definitely do. Wow.
Most definitely. So
anyway,
I just encourage anybody that perhaps has had, similar experiences to myself, suffered abuse and that. Often the healing comes when we seek out others we can help. If we stay within our bubble of the world is terrible and it's terrible, you'll end up staying in that, and it just gets worse. You've got to somehow find a way to connect, whether it's saving animals. If you're
sense of purpose.
I get it. Correct. Yeah. Yes. And the more you give out, the more will come back. And
totally.
and see, I worked with animals and I worked with kids, and they say that, I reckon you shouldn't do either, but I found them both extremely rewarding and very healing for myself. And even though
if you're not ready for healing, if you're going there for dodgy purposes, then please stay away. Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's absolutely incredible, and I fully agree. For somebody to wake up with a sense of purpose in the morning is so important. You need to wake up with that sense of purpose, whether it's an animal that needs your attention, a child that needs your attention, or you're actually working with somebody in a healing way, or you're starting to maybe get a job, that's something you enjoy doing. It's so important to get that sense of purpose, to wake up in the morning, have that sense of purpose, get your kind of I have a routine, that I start with every day, that I reset my body. When I wake up, there's things I do for the first hour that I just reset my body, and then I start my day. It's actually amazing to do that. But anyway, I want to say thank you, Kerri, for your beautiful testimony here today. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's in the chat and who's joined us and passed comments and gave us a giggle and what have you. And Janine, I want to say have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day. Enjoy your birthday. Birthdays are special. I don't care what anyone says. Enjoy it. It's the day that you came to this planet and decided to make your debut here. So have it in style, that's for sure. Anyway, and I want to just say to you guys, I'm going to put something on the community tab as well. For those of you interested in fasting, I spoke about it on Caleb's show last night as well. We're starting to do our weekly dry fast again. So it'll be on a Tuesday from dusk till Wednesday dusk. So it's 24 hours, right? And it's not dusk till dawn. It's dusk to dusk. So it's a 24-hour cycle. So when the sun goes down on Tuesday until when the sun goes down on Wednesday. We fast because along with prayer, fasting is very powerful. And we do a dry fast if you can, which means we don't drink water on that day either. But do what you can. If you can manage to do an intermittent fast during that day, or if you just want to fast with water that day. And obviously, if you really need water, whatever, take a sip. But do it sort of in a sippy way. That's what I do when we do these fasts, especially with my shows. I do definitely need to drink something when I'm speaking. So I just have small sips of water during that time. we fast, we pray, we set an intention. It's always for something greater than what we are, a spiritual intention, just to heal, for collectively heal, and I just think it's amazing that when we all do it together, it becomes a lot more powerful. So I'm going to put it out there. So we're starting tomorrow, today is Monday. I don't know where in the world you are. I think Kerri even used tomorrow. So yeah, we'll start this tomorrow, Tuesday dusk till Wednesday dusk. And I hope you guys will join us. Okay, everybody. Yeah, I think, Simona, I don't think we should do more. Don't do more than what you can manage, right? Or what you can't manage. And really, everyone's body is different. So do what is manageable for you. Okay, do what is manageable for you. And it's true, one does humble yourself when fasting. I mean, for me, it's like, and I always, I do and have done quite a bit of fasting in my life. And it's like I love to tell the story about Lawrence van der Post, who's a South African author, and he lived with the Bushman people for quite a while. And the Bushman people are just incredible. And they talk about the little hunger and the great hunger. And the little hunger would be the hunger of the belly, which is the food you eat and what have you. And I think it becomes also such an interesting exercise to notice how we cover up things with food. I've noticed that with myself as well. If I'm stressed or whatever, before I know it, I'm standing in front of my fridge or my grocery cupboard, right? So I've long ago stopped buying junk food for that reason. But when we decide to fast, it's like the greater hunger is the sense of purpose. And as the Bushman people believe, that life without purpose is a very miserable life. So what happens when we fast and we get hungry and we get thirsty? And I found the dry fasting to be phenomenal, because it's one thing, I mean, I don't like to eat much anyway, so I can easily go for 3 or 5 days and just drink water. That for me is cool. I like doing that, right? But the dry fasting is on another level for me, because I only started doing that. Like Caleb introduced me to that at the end of last year. And because it really gets you, whoa, what is this? And then you start, during that time, you pray, you meditate, you contemplate, whatever you do, and you write down, you get your journal, you write, what am I feeling? What am I really craving for right now? Because at the end of the day, you're not that hungry, okay? It's like a day that you're not eating. So it's not like you're starving yourself to death. I mean, so what is it that you're really craving? What is this that you're really seeking? What is it you truly are hungry for? And it's in those moments, and when we become humble, then our answers will come. They might not come in that second or in that moment. They might come an hour later. Hey, they might even come a day later. They might even come a week later. But when you're consistently doing that, and especially when we're doing it collectively, it's very powerful. So I want to invite you guys to join us for that. I will put something up. Yeah, and it's many years method. Lots of practice fasting. Janine, yeah, I know. And Caleb, you find yourself in the dry desert. Absolutely, I agree with that. So when there's a desert and it's dry and you're giving yourself that challenge for 1 day a week, you're going to find a lot of gems in that dry desert. Anyway, guys, that's me for today. I don't have any other further shows. We don't have Bryce today because obviously being Easter Monday, she's traveling and what have you. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, I have another beautiful Australian, Rachel Vaughan. Now, you guys might remember I was chatting to her maybe a year and a half ago. She was on my show as well. So Rachel Vaughan will be joining me at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, which is an hour earlier than what we started with Kerri. And then I've got the Cryptid Huntress. I love her, Jessica Jones, tomorrow night as well. Fascinating lady. Wow. Super, super fascinating. So, and lots of new guests this week as well. And I have to say that on Friday as well, John Perkins, I'm interviewing him. Now, if you guys have been listening to me, John Perkins is the author of the Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And I mean, what an amazing story. He speaks about, I mean, he was trained by the Alphabet Boys, and pretty much they are sent into especially third world countries and Africa. And he came, and I first saw him when he was in South Africa many years ago. And he was being interviewed on some of our top TV stations here about his book, where he was then speaking about what these guys do. They come to these third world countries and they corrupt the governments and pretty much put them into debt, okay? And that's how the US was usurping resources from the third world countries. And when they can't obviously put them into, when they can't repay the debt that they've been put into, then they say, well, hand over your resources.
Yeah.
So he's another amazing whistleblower. And his book, actually, the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, is on the New York bestseller list as well. So fantastic book. I'm actually listening to it on audiobook right now. So yeah, join us for that as well. So if you want to just check out the weekly schedule, it's all over on my social media. You know what, Christy, I want to just say that it's not just the US, and I don't want to, I really just want to say it's not just the US. South Africa, look, hey, I'm an ancestor. I'm not an ancestor. I'm a descendant of some of the worst colonizers on this planet as well. We've all done dirties on each other. And I just think that right now it's so important that we can just expose it, you know, because when we bring things into the light, that's when we bring in the healing as well. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, but that's not the intention of me putting that out there. I just think it's so important for people to know this information, because if you know it, you can change it. And, you know, then we all, and that's why we fast, right? That's why we fast. It's not just about personal gain. It's about bringing light as a group and a collective to these situations so that we can see the light. And that's why I say, trust me, I am a descendant of some of the worst. I mean, I'm royal bloodlines on both sides of my parents as well, definitely, when you look at that. So rest assured.
Well, just as well, we're not doing an interview after a fast with me, because I get pretty hyper. People get quite tired. I go the opposite direction. The more I go without food, the more alert, the more switched on, and more energy I've got. And
yeah, exactly. I'm the same, actually. I often have to force myself just to be still and just breathe and just take it in. Otherwise, sometimes I get tired. I must say so. Depends what I've been eating.
Sleep. When I fast, like if I go past a certain point, I can't sleep. I just go, get up and I use my brain for something. Yeah, it's quite weird, but yeah.
Exactly. Yay, everybody. Okay, great to have you here, and I hope to see you on the fast. And in the meantime, I will see you again tomorrow. Kerri, thank you so much again for joining me today and just sharing your beautiful story. Look forward to seeing you again. Oh, and we're full of Australians this week again. And then Joanne Breeze on Friday. Fantastic lady that, with her also been through some horrific horrors, and now with her kangaroo sanctuary, and she's healing with the Joeys. I mean, how awesome is that? I mean, I just want to hug one of those things. Anyway, guys, I'll see you soon. God bless you all. Take care.
Everyone. Bye.